I am Stephen Walton. I am the manager of our cybersecurity operations. So historically, you've contacted the team for firewall, CrowdStrike, Zscaler, Akamai, general security issues. I've got Patrick Sullivan here, as a cybersecurity analyst. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey everybody. Like Steven said, my name is Patrick. I work primarily with our CrowdStrike service here on the SecOps team. If you've gotten emails from us, you've probably heard from me.
So, in this lunchtime hour, which hopefully folks have good stuff to eat, we'll be going over 4 points. Point four is the most important here, but point one is these are managed services. However, if you are active inside of them, you will see that you're given a lot of great visibility. You're given a lot of good information. These tools can CrowdStrike act as a CMDB light. It obviously complements Run Zero well for those of you who have used that tool. The Palo Alto will give you good visibility into your traffic. Point two, by looking at these tools, you can either rule out problems that maybe it's an internal routing issue, so it's not even hitting the firewall. Maybe CrowdStrike's not blocking something. CrowdStrike can reveal information such as CPU usage, memory usage, installed apps. Sort of helps you triangulate where you're at when you get a client issue. And point three being that follow through, we will share a lab environment, but we're not going to share your lab environment. And point four is these are best done when we can do a one-on-one review with you in your environment. These tools can be complicated, daunting, especially if you're a generalist, scattered, touching everything a little bit at a time. We're always more than happy to do deep dives in your environment with your data, help you find actionable elements that are as close to home as possible. With that, we will start with the Palo Alto. So Palo Alto gives good visibility into your network. Something about the Palo Alto is it's not just passing traffic and filtering on port and IP. It can go down to identify the application involved. So there was questions around Quick. You can start to see some of that. You can see bytes transferred. We'll show that in the console real quickly. But by looking at the Palo Alto, sort of understanding what it's saying, how to do some basic search querying with that data, it can help you either like I said, solve a problem without necessarily having to open up a ticket if you see it's not a Palo Alto issue, or B, can help you open up a better ticket that has a little bit more detailed information, just so we skip over some of that early troubleshooting phases. Of course, as always, we're here to help you every step of the way. So if you just open up a ticket, say, hey, can you guide me through this? Always happy to take a train the trainer type approach. So the first part here is the ACC dashboard. And I've got some light screenshots in the slides that we'll breeze through once I'm done sharing the Palo Alto interface. That way you can review this later on. But the ACC dashboard, when you log in, your display might be a little bit different just because we've got a little bit of restricted access for clients logging in. I'm just logged in locally on a PA460 instead of through our panorama interface. However, the ACC screen here is your very high level summary of your environment. So instances that this has been useful is if you're experiencing a little bit of network latency and you contact the NOC and they say, hey, you're quoted for a gig link, you're using a gig of traffic, you can come in here and this is where the Palo is starting to classify some of this traffic. It's calling out CrowdStrike traffic, it's calling out Palo Alto updates, Google base. These are mapped to what Palo Alto has in their Applepedia and is pretty self-explanatory, but imagine a scenario where you're getting back into school, you're starting to fire up a bunch of those iPads or Chromebooks, and you haven't had Chris Lovett set up a cache server for you to help cache those updates and limit some of the external bandwidth usage. You'll see this spike greatly, and you'll also see this timeline chart here where you can see your traffic ebb and flow. You can come down here to see what is using that traffic. Little chart here. And you can start to manipulate it by times over here. This helps give you a quick idea of what's going on leaving and entering your network, and helps, again, triangulate if you're getting a bunch of updates onto Apple products or Chromebooks. You can see that you will just be getting hammered by that traffic. Some of these may populate depending on what you've got in your environment. Those of you who have VPN set up will start to see user information for your VPN users in here. However, otherwise, you'll start to see information around top talkers, top IP addresses. To generate this traffic spike here, I just downloaded an Ubuntu ISO, so you can see it's mapping back to that. It'll let you see if YouTube's a big talker or if you've got whatever other website that might be rather prolific in your district or in your school. Click around through these, and as always, if you've got questions about your specific environment, that's what our ticketing system's for. Just feel free to reach out, propose a few 30-minute time slots, and again, we'll dive in deep with you. The next part is traffic filtering. So in the monitor tab, the Palo Alto by default is just going to have its on-device traffic logging. Depending on the size of your environment, how much traffic you've got going, you may see only the last 8 hours of this traffic. If you're in a little bit of a smaller environment, this may go back even further. I say this because you sort of want to look at your traffic as close to the reported problem as possible. If a user reports something at 8, 9 a.m. and you try to look at it at 5, 6 p.m., you're in a very large active district, then this traffic may have rolled out of the logs. Similarly, if you open up a support ticket with us and say earlier yesterday at 8 a.m., the client user had this issue, it may have rolled out the logs and will ask to test again. However, when looking at the traffic, some of the great stuff you can start to glean from this is a user says they can't get to X website. You can grab their source IP, and without even needing to know what the search syntax is for Palo Alto, you can come in here and just start to click on IPs. It populates for it. If you want to look for 2 given IPs, like 10.11, and it's not in here, well, just click it and boom, there you go. You got your and. It uses basic logic like or. You can nest the stuff that's for later on. That's once you've gotten familiar jumping around here. Set your time to auto update if you're testing live and you want to see it populate, or leave it to manual. You can hit search and be able to give it a second. So that's 4 and get your information. When looking at these, and we'll scroll over to the side here, you've got your destination. You can pull. You've got different columns that may or may not be visible depending on what you've selected. Not all of these will be populated. However, it's good to know that they're aware. But when we start looking at the port over here, so if we were to look at that quick instance again, quick is UDP 443. You could click port destination equals 443 and equals UDP. Search for that. We can start to see the quick traffic that is leaving the firewall, or in this case, type is drop, so it's not being allowed out. We can see the directionality, so from the inside zone going out. We'll see the rule that's blocking it. So the geo block is what we install on all firewalls to block traffic from non-US and Canada country codes. That's important to note because sometimes you may work with somebody in LATAM, or you may have a user that is temporarily overseas needing to access your environment. This geo block is relatively high in that ordered list, so it'll block a lot of stuff preemptively. You also get to see the bytes sent and received. The bytes field is pretty interesting here because if you're looking at a user trying to connect to a website and you're seeing an error, if you were to look at that type of scenario and play it out, let's see. I will go back to my slides to pull up my example. If we were to look at that, so we want to look for anything in my test VM 1.5 here that is going to a destination that's not in Google DNS. We can start to see what traffic is going out there, and we can start to see the bytes transferred. We also get to see why the session ended. So UDP, obviously you won't see this, it's connectionless, but in a TCP connection, HTTPS, you can start to see what's going on here. So TCP reset from client, that's the direction of my computer. So if the user at 1.5 here said, hey, I cannot access to given resource, and they're showing this, you can say, well, something's going on. You've got 1.6 kilobytes sent, you've received 14.4 kilobytes. There's something going on, and then your user workstation is sending the reset. Or you may see these scenarios where TCP reset from server. So if we look at a lot of the state testing software, they want to permit list your public IP. And if you're trying to access one of those resources and it's failing, you can come in here, you can look at the rule, action allow. TCP reset from server would be very indicative of that state server just rejecting that connection. There's no reason to really open up an MCNC ticket here. You would just contact that state resource and say, hey, here's the public IP, here's the NAT that you can expect this traffic from. TCP thin, that's good. That's a graceful close. And again, just good information for you to see. If it's blocked or denied, you'll see the rule that is taking that action on it. So overall, just a lot of good information for you to see in here. You can export these to PDF, Excel, manipulate it if you want. If you're going to think about that rolling traffic scenario where yesterday, 8 a.m., something happened, you won't be able to submit the ticket until much later on. You can grab these logs and just get your good search filter, export those, attach them to the ticket. That way you're just tailoring and narrowing down to avoid any logs rolling over. In addition to the traffic logs here, in the search syntax, if you follow up with me, I can send you the Palo Alto search syntax guide. If you're a fan of using generative AI, you can a lot of times massage Gemini or ChatGPT or something into crafting some search queries here. Just feed it generic IP information and work with it a little bit to get a more complex search query going. But I say that because the search syntax is also used in the threat field. One of the other benefits of the managed service, this Palo Alto here, is that includes Palo's threat feed. This is a real-time updating intrusion detection style software. The Palo is looking at all traffic, both leaving and entering your network, and it's matching it to its database of threat signatures. As much as possible, it's going to try to match it. It'll call out a lot of the similar information you'll see. The good thing is these threat logs are only created when it sees something that would meet such criteria. So a lot of times this will go back weeks, even if your traffic logs are only going back days. The threat ID name is in here. By default, MCNC service, we will just do the alert on medium, low informational. However, for the highs and the criticals, we will default block them. That is a evaluation engineering did where we determined that the criticals and highs, given with the way Palo handles these and updates them, is sufficiently robust enough to where the likelihood of false positives is very minimal. It is worth pointing this out, though, because if you're looking at something, the traffic log will say if this was blocked due to a threat ID, or you can go in here and start to look for other information yourself if you think it might be at play. This is also just good information to look at because you know your internal environment. You know what is your sensitive devices, non-sensitive ones. You can search some of these by subnet. So subnet filters do work. Hopefully my search syntax is accurate. Yeah, so you can search by subnets. So imagine if you have some free time or if you've got somebody who wants to do a cybersecurity project, and in turn, nobody's got time, but for the sake of this example, assume we do. You'd have somebody log in here and just search for your management network. And we don't care about stuff coming outside in unless you know that that specific server is public facing. So you could even go further to narrow this down to and zone is inside. That way you're not receiving any outside in traffic. And then you can start to look at what vulnerabilities are present. Building on the search syntax as I'm clicking around, I don't know the exact syntax off of my head to do this, but I do know that not equal and not in are things. So I don't want to have this encrypted client hello HTTPS. This is a very informational one. Um, let's see, hit search there. And we can start to narrow down into what we're looking at. So this is a messy security operations lab. We can start to see that now these devices have some spyware on them. Maybe that's something that we now want to action. It's reaching out on DNS base. Or we can start to describe, hey, how do we want to stop this? Ideally, we would go to this host, this 1.12, and look at what spyware is on there, maybe review in CrowdStrike and try to, clean up whatever's on there. Or potentially, if we see this widespread enough and we see this as a questionable DNS entry that's being allowed, maybe there's the possibility of tightening up what DNS is permitted. And the application component here is really nice because you can permit DNS base, which is Palo permitting just DNS on UDP TCP 53. It will not permit UDP 53 generically. So it helps with some of that tunneling aspect that you'll see in cyber attacks. But let's roll out this part, see what else we have in here, and we'll just continue working down. There's a little bit of threat hunting here if you think you've got a idea around what may or may not be in your environment, or if you start getting IOCs from other sources, you can start to pipe those in here, and we can see that if we rule out subtype spyware inclusive of everything else, or if we just pull this back to say anything within the subnet that is also spyware, really we're just getting that blocked encrypted client hello. Something like this can help you narrow down and say, okay, well, this is a pretty clean environment for a lab environment. Finally, as we were looking at this, we were looking at naming convention for rules. And this is where we get to the policy side. So you'll be able to see your policy. And the reason why it's helpful to understand the rule naming convention is this is standard across our entire fleet. For anybody who may be a contractor at multiple school environments, this is even more appropriate to understand. But when you contact us, it just helps you sort of triangulate that ticket a little bit. We name these not based off of this number here, because this is flexible depending on your view. I can see some things about the device that are MCNC management specific you can't see, but this name here is going to be static. Looking at these, anything that would be a 10 or a 15 are the ones that you really want to look at. And I logged these in the naming convention here. So 0005 and let's see, 15 are the ones we really care about. So looking at these, you can also sort of pull this out contextually as well. Zone inside to zone outside 15, all these match that same pattern. You can assume that any ordering of rules, you would say, hey, I've got a inside to outside. I need to allow access to a new vendor. MCNC, can you add a new 0015 rule? Zone is inside. The source IPs, and this touches a little bit on opening a ticket, providing that internal IP, that subnet, very powerful. We're going to ask for it anyway. Source block, here's the /24. Here's as specific as possible, least privilege. Going to zone outside on address any. If it is a singular IP, full, easy. If it is a subnet, you can see we can work with those. We can work with FQDNs. And then you can start telling us as much as possible the application. If you expect this to be purely a HTTPS outbound connection, that's ideal. Tell us such. Application HTTPS. Service, if you don't know and you just want to say it's TCP 443, you don't know if it's going to qualify as that, that's fine. All of this information helps build the rule. Additionally, when you're looking in your logs, you can start to see hit count and last hit. You own your environment. You know your environment the best. We've done some hardening working through your environment with you. However, if you're ever in here just casually reviewing something, you need to get in a new rule and you start to see these hit counts 0, or you start to see last hit 6 months ago, a year ago, and you determine that that rule is no longer needed, submit a ticket saying, hey, please remove rule 0015 dot blah, because that helps clean up your policy. It's one less thing to worry about. It just helps keep the firewall nice and tidy. Otherwise, you may see us propose that. You can submit a ticket saying, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z in here. Can we make this change? We'll review the firewall. We'll review all of the policy. And you may see us proposing, oh, by the way, we saw this that hasn't been hit since November of 2025. Is this something that you want to consider cleaning up, or do you still need this? Acknowledging that there's always that slight risk of that once a year or once a semester type of flow that will bite you at the least opportune time. So finally, and this is word salad, this is designed for you're reviewing these slides afterwards, or if you want to screenshot this and maybe tell Gemini to make it a checklist, you can. To help you when opening a ticket, we have a 24/7, 365 service desk. If you're opening tickets through the ServiceNow customer portal, boom, there you go. It'll go to them. They'll triage it. This is some of the stuff that they're looking for. This is the stuff they'll ask you about. So keep that in mind when you're submitting these tickets. Is first off, what's the urgency? We have a daily change window of 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. If you submit something the morning of 9, 10 a.m., we'll do our best to get it in that window. However, that's conditional on having the information there, not having to reply back and ask you, hey, is this clear? Do we need to add a source destination port, something like that? If it is urgent, though, let us know. Tell us, hey, we need to have this pushed as soon as possible. We can trigger some internal processes to expedite and work around our change window. We ask that as much as possible, you try to pre-plan ahead. Our CNE team in the past has helped schools that are doing relatively large changes that may result in a lot of these coming in just in time. You can sort of plan out and map things out a little bit ahead of time. That way it's not so much of a fire drill. Basic troubleshooting stuff, you expect your users to provide this. Is this something net new that's never worked before, or are we fixing something that used to work? Obviously, that helps triangulate. Is this a change in the environment that has now resulted in something? Did a public IP change internal IP? And then, of course, the basic anatomy of a firewall rule, the source IP ports, destination IP ports, what is the expected application type? And again, I point out, if you want to permit just DNS and you don't want to permit everything, or you don't want to permit just generic anything on UDP 53, we can support that. If you've reviewed any of the traffic or threat logs and you think you've got an idea of where the failure may be, include that information. That's always really good information because you know your environment, you know what's going on, you have that context. We can certainly help. We can certainly do this on your behalf. Again, this is just expediency of getting that ticket completed. And finally, is there any vendor documentation? I know this can be a stickler. A lot of times a instructor or somebody may go, hey, tech person, we need this to work now. We've already spent money. You're blindsided by it. You don't have the first look of information about it, neither does MCNC. However, pushing back, getting that vendor documentation, that helps take rules that otherwise might be vague and tighten them up a little bit. And the final note is, unfortunately, being security, we may resist or push back on unclear, unsecure, or vague rules. Part of this service is we want to help you keep a secure environment. We want to help you maintain that. We don't want to be antagonistic or bad folks, but we have also seen sometimes where a poor quality request may come in. You're proxying it along to us, and your response goes back to whoever's asking for that rule going, my security vendor says this isn't secure as it is. We need to do better. And that might be the ammo you need to help just give you a little bit more on getting that implemented properly. And again, we can always coordinate with CNE if it's one of those areas where, hey, I don't know how to do a better rule here. I don't know what is secure. This is all one MCNC. Just let us know, hey, can we get somebody involved from CNE? That's what they're for. We all cooperate. We're on the same team here. We get you taken care of. With that, I can turn it over to Patrick. And Patrick, do you want to share your screen out?
Yeah, I'll take over here. Let's see. This should be the one. Great. So, hello, good afternoon. Let's talk CrowdStrike. Um, the biggest win for CrowdStrike here, from our perspective of you guys getting in there and taking a look at everything, is visibility, right? CrowdStrike is a great tool for getting visibility into your environment, especially if you don't have some other great dedicated solution, right? We're going to look mostly through exposure management today. And so, again, big thing here, right? You can't protect or manage something you can't find. So CrowdStrike has a lot of built-in dashboards that let us see all sorts of things from detections to account information, asset management, vulnerabilities. The sensor collects data in real time, right? So it loads right alongside your kernel there, and it is logging everything that those devices do. DNS requests, network connections, opening processes, opening, writing files, reading files. Um, your asset management source of truth here, CrowdStrike again lives on all your managed devices and reports on everything that it sees, both from itself and on the network alongside them. It also handles vulnerability assessment and tracking, right? We'll kind of go through some of these later here. So I'm gonna pop into our CrowdStrike dashboard here, and we can feel free to follow along as we work through exposure management. Just kind of seeing what that looks like. So here we see our home page in CrowdStrike. This is exactly what you guys will look at when you log in every time. Coming up to this hamburger menu, down into exposure management, where we're going to, again, spend most of our time today. And we're going to start with accounts. It should be noted that on any of these dashboards and everything, any page that you feel like something that shows something that you want to see more regularly, you can go ahead and use this home button here to set as your home page. If you really only are using CrowdStrike to see accounts in your environment, set this as your home page, right? MCNC is here taking care of detections day to day. It's not something you guys necessarily have to monitor, but if you don't have a good way to look at account information, CrowdStrike's here to help. At the top of all of these dashboards, you're going to see filters. We can add or remove different filters here, and it'll update every widget on the page. In here, CrowdStrike tracks failed logins by the username, by account privileges, right? Whether they're domain users, domain admins, or just a local admin on a device. We can see login attempts, failed and success, and what kind of users you have that are doing, not doing a good job logging into their devices, or maybe are being targeted for like brute force logins. We can see how people are logging in as well, right? If you have a lot of people who are local and are caching credentials, right? That might be something you want to take a look at. And also where they're coming from. Surely most people are only here in the US. And again, most people are probably only in North Carolina. If you want to see if you have somebody logging into any of your devices outside of that space, this is where we can do that. In all of these exposure management sections, they have submenus, right? So we can go into accounts here and see all of the different account information reported from our CrowdStrike devices. We can see the domains they're associated with, the last time they set a password. We can see the last device that they logged into, the last way they failed or succeeded. This is really good if you guys want to keep track of accounts that have stale passwords, right? Setting up excuse me, setting up some policy to reset passwords regularly is good security practice, right? We don't necessarily want to make people change passwords too regularly. That leads to people just incrementing a number at the end of your password, which isn't fantastic. But doing it once a year and using a password manager, probably a great idea. We can also see here failed logins and successful logins, maybe how many times someone has logged in unsuccessfully. Um, this is We can see me here failing to log in a good number of times this morning, just kind of create some traffic in here. And again, all of these pages, right, we can change our filters here, as well as export any of these as reports. And everything that we are going through today can be set up as a scheduled report, sent to your inbox weekly, monthly, however you kind of want, and in a lot of different formats as well, which is real interesting stuff. Like Steven said, we are always available for some time to set something up with you guys. This is also the exact view that you guys have in here. So everything you see me clicking on is something that you will have in your account. This is an account with the exact same privileges as everybody else has set up in CrowdStrike. So moving on to applications. Here we can get a good source of truth for applications used in your environment, right? Some people, maybe you guys want to limit people to only use a specific browser. We can come in here and find hosts that are using a different browser. Maybe you guys have a particular remote management tool that you use. We can come in here and see other remote management tools being used in your environment. Let's see, used versus installed applications. Those are those used applications are those that are not necessarily installed in a standard directory. So if these exist in user space, for example, you'll see them here versus installed applications, which are those that are installed in program files. And these are the ones that you'll see on Windows, for example, that have an entry in the control panel. We can see applications with suspicious activity, people that have too many applications, some low prevalence applications in the environment. Splits it up nicely by the category of the application as well as by platform. You can see our lab environment here is pretty exclusively Windows, so not a lot of great variety for us here. We can look at things by vendor. And again, most and least installed is really going to be a good uh, data point here, right? If you have too many people running, again, some obscure application, that might be something we can look into and take a look at. Applications can be grouped in a number of different ways by the application. We can see on the different hosts that are being used. I can use this little icon over here as well to change the display of this table so that if I were to export this as a report, it would change what we get, what gets exported. We can also group by the asset or a user here, and you can see all the different applications on a particular user or on a particular device. Clicking into any entry in these tables pulls up a detail window over here, providing additional information about the applications, the device itself, as well as browser extensions, which I should actually note back over here. We have applications overview as well as a browser extensions overview. Installed and used browser extensions, again, those are that are registered with your computer versus not registered and just live inside of the browser. Some things about permission severity, right? I can click on any of these as well and it'll open up another tab. Anything that highlights as I come over it. This will open up another tab here, showing me just those browser extensions with critical severity permissions. I can open up that in another tab. We can take a look at that in just a second. Browser extensions are a big vector for malicious activity, so this is a good place for us to get some information here about the ones that our users are using. So again, this is the page that I opened up, clicking onto that critical severity. We can see these are all of the browser extensions, excuse me, that have critical permissions turned on. I can add specifically what those permissions are over here with this filter. And we can kind of see, okay, Google Docs Offline shows us the specific permissions that it gives. And we can say, hey, I don't think this is a big problem for users in my environment. I understand that this is something they want to use. Or, hey, maybe I trust Google, right? Sufficiently to allow this in the environment. Application groups are another good highlight here. This can be set up along with reports to say, hey, I have applications that I want every user in my environment to have. If somebody removes one of those applications, I can get an email about it. If somebody installs an application that is not on my approved applications group, I want a notification about it. Send me an email. Again, these are things that you can do on your own, or you can give us a call and we can help you set these up. Schedule reports are basically some view of these sent to you regularly. Continue on to assets up here. Now, the first thing you'll notice here on the assets page is a few different categories of assets. We have managed, unmanaged, and unsupported assets. Managed assets are those that have the CrowdStrike sensor installed on them. Unmanaged assets here are those assets seen on the network by your managed assets that CrowdStrike believes you could also install the sensor on. We are mostly deployed to staff devices, but your teachers probably sit alongside some of your students that have devices that CrowdStrike might be able to get onto. Unsupported assets are those seen by your managed assets that CrowdStrike should not and cannot be installed on. These are things like printers, routers, stuff like that, other IoT devices. You'll see in our lab environment, we have 19 total assets, and 9 of those are managed, and 10 of them are unsupported. Again, anytime in any of these views that you hover over something and it highlights, we can flip to that. I see someone in the Q&A say they are not seeing the updated screen share, so I'm not 100% sure what you guys are looking at, but I will try and fix that real quick.
I can see your screen, Patrick.
Lovely. Okay, so we are at assets here again. If somebody was unable to see anything, please pop in some questions and let me know. We can go back over anything you're interested in. Again, anytime you're on one of these dashboards and something highlights, as it does when I hover over these, you can click onto that and it'll pop you to the page that describes exactly that thing. In here, assets dashboard shows us managed assets by the operating system and whether or not they are in end of service, right? If they are old and need to be updated, we can see things that are workstations, domain controllers, or servers. There's not a lot, again, in our lab environment here. So not great information, but if you guys want to take a look at yours individually with us and go kind of get an overview of what's going on in here, again, let us know, set up a call, and we're happy to take some time and click through these with you. Managed assets, just like everywhere else, we can click on one of the devices and get some details about that device over here. Further device details are available in full details. That'll open up another page and show us things like vulnerabilities, all the installed applications, browser extensions on the device, users that have logged in. Again, unmanaged devices are those that our managed devices can see, but are and CrowdStrike things that can be installed on, versus unsupported assets, those that CrowdStrike cannot cannot be installed on. So here, from our lab environment, you can see my other, this is my work device. CrowdStrike can't get installed on this because it's already installed in a different way, which is a little bit of a confusing report. You guys probably shouldn't see something like this. Otherwise, we can see things like our some Cisco devices in here. The probably most interesting bit of asset management or the asset dashboards here are these system insights. Stephen mentioned earlier, some of the things you can see in here are BIOS versions and your average system specs, right? We can see how much disk space people are using, on average, how their memory is utilized. This is really interesting for maybe sorting by saying, hey, who's about to run out of space, right? We gave you 64 gigs. You're kind of using a lot of that. Maybe we upgrade you to some additional storage, or maybe you just need to clean up some of the stuff that you have on here. This is most effective with Windows devices. You will get some information out of Mac and Linux, but this is mostly tailored towards Windows devices.
There's a Q&A that says, I've been concerned if our CrowdStrike is actually working. Our last detection was June 24th. I've tried doing the test alert as well via choice \m CrowdStrike sample detection and responding to it from command prompt, and it did not detect it. Has anyone else been experiencing similar? It concerns me because our teachers bring their laptops home over the summer.
It's a great
Yeah.
question.
So with that one, David, always feel free to, submit a ticket, ask us. This is where we talk about doing a review in your environment is best because we can look through specifically what's going on. We typically see that when, and part of why CrowdStrike stands out is it's very low false positive. So necessarily not having detections isn't a bad thing. Obviously, having a lot of detections is not ideal. And in past times, we've seen either environments that are really clean and the users aren't installing a bunch of adware and junk like that, or some laptops might just be powered off for a long time. But we can certainly get a ticket open and review your environment one on one with you and do a health check like that if you want as well.
Assuming you're also following along here in your environment, if you pop into managed assets, we can see here the last time some of your devices were seen, right? Uh, we can see I only have 9 devices in our lab environment that have been seen in the last 45 days. And what that really means is if the device does not check into the CrowdStrike cloud in 45 days, it will fall out, waiting for the next time that it comes in. As long as you can see the device here, it is connecting to the cloud. If it's connecting to the cloud, the sensor is running, we should be good. We can see here too, if I click into these, whether or not the sensor is operational and up to date, or if the operating system is end of service, right? And so these are important for healthy operation of this. And after I finish vulnerabilities here, we will also go over real quick um, next-gen SIEM, where you can see in real time the uh, activity that is being logged from your sensors. So finally, in exposure management is vulnerabilities. This is a big one for your stakeholders as well, right? Being able to see all the vulnerabilities and watching this number go down. Everyone loves to see the number go down here, right? So you can see across our lab environment, there are 54,000, almost 55,000 total vulnerabilities, with 130 actions we can take to fix those 60,000, 55,000 vulnerabilities. You can get some information about those remediations over here. So adding appropriate permission policy headers to our web server will fix 1,000 vulnerabilities, or excuse me, 6,000 vulnerabilities that will be fixed from this one action. You can see these here by the expert rating, which is CrowdStrike's particular risk score management. Basically, what this is saying compared to the CVE score, right? They are taking how likely it is that somebody is using this, how prevalent these are recently, how easy it is to, I think my screen share looks like it's been messed up again. How easy it is to exploit and what kind of like access you might need to make that happen. You can see specific vulnerability IDs. Anything that does not have a CVE number is like a CrowdStrike specific one. So you'll see some that start with CS, and that is saying CrowdStrike doesn't see this as having been reported with an official CVE, but we can say this is not necessarily good for you to have as well. We can look at the individual vulnerabilities in here. Grouped by the vulnerability ID, the asset, a specific product, excuse me, or a remediation. Again, clicking into any of these, we get some more details about these. Grouping these by assets, we can also see evidence of how CrowdStrike determined that you were vulnerable to a specific vulnerability here. We can see patches that are installed. Your Windows devices should also be able to receive patches through here. And we can force some updates as well, which is interesting information. You can see patches that have been installed that are pending reboots versus those that are very recently installed. We can also see here in the knowledge base what exactly CrowdStrike is tracking. Information about what they're checking for, things that they are in fact tracking. If a new breaking CVE comes out and you are worried about it, you can come right in here, look up that number, and see if CrowdStrike is already testing for it. This gets updated on your devices regularly. Every couple of hours, it scans your device, reports back up to the cloud. When you fix something, the device takes a little bit of time to register that it has been resolved as well. So coming in here and saying, hey, I just patched node.js. Why is it still reporting in here? It just hasn't come through yet, and it will shortly. I have a little bit of time here, so I will come over into Next-Gen SIEM, this advanced event search, just to show you real quick live information from our devices, right? You can come in here and see that events are coming in from our devices. You can see how many events in periods of time and just some real detail about this. This is kind of, I think, more technical than most people will need to get in this, but this is something that we use surely to, look from our side and determine what's happening in your environment. Come back and go back to my slides here. By far the most common question we get from people is, hey, I have this application that seems to be having some issues. Do we think CrowdStrike might be the problem here? And that might be the application is crashing or it doesn't open, or it might just be having performance issues. The fastest thing you can do is go check CrowdStrike to see if there was a detection on that host for the device and application in question. If there is no notification to the end user and there was no detection in CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike did not block it on purpose, right? We are set up to notify you. CrowdStrike is not supposed to do anything without telling us that it's done something. So before we opened a ticket here, we wanted to go check to see, are there any logs from that application? Did we get a detection? If there are no detections, let's try and recreate and capture some logs. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about recreating logs today, or recreating problems and capturing logs today. Procmon is something good to get familiar with for endpoints, right? Similarly, for performance issues, right? CrowdStrike wants us to collect logs specifically with xperf. You can find this on Microsoft's website about that, or you can let us know that, hey, we're having some performance issues. Can you go ahead and send us that information about how to pick these up? Open a ticket, let us know what the application is, where it's running from and everything, and we'll go ahead and put in some exclusions with you, right? Sensor visibility exclusions essentially turn off the sensor for that particular directory. And that'll allow you to run the application without any interference with CrowdStrike. We can open up some support tickets and hopefully get them to fix those performance issues as well. And that, I think, is the end of mine. Yeah. In summary, from the Palo and CrowdStrike here, right? You have a lot of visibility between the two of these. Taking a look for yourself in here and getting familiar, clicking around may save you a lot of time, whether or not it's necessary for you to reach out to us to make changes, or if you can solve the problem on your own here, right? As always, we are very happy and eager to get on a call with you and talk about your particular environment. Let us know. You can reach us via email or call anytime you want. And I think that gives us a few minutes if anyone has any questions.
This is also a good time to mention if you are going to be doing a lot of new device provisioning in your environment. We do recommend pulling down the sensor from the cloud at the beginning of every semester. The sensor does update, it's got a certificate that they rotate out periodically. So you just want to make sure you've got that current sensor. Otherwise, you may get into a scenario where you're trying to install a sensor that's no longer supported, and that can cause random challenges. It's also a good time to take anything that might have deep freeze on it or has been powered off for a substantial amount of time and just give it a chance to, alongside Windows updates and everything else, just let the sensor update itself automatically through the cloud. You don't have to babysit it too much, but it is typically good to do an install, give it 30 minutes to an hour, longer is better, just so it can fully install, pull down the cloud policy, start to inventory, send stuff up to the cloud. The sensor is very lightweight. It doesn't try to impact and monopolize the system, but unfortunately, that trade-off is sometimes your client doesn't know you installed it, but if you're installing it on a machine and the installer completes and you shut the lid and put it on a rack, it'll be in a sort of partial state until it reboots. A lot of times a reboot will fix those as well.